Hello, I'm Hannah and welcome to my podcast, Don't Tell Me to Relax, the antidote to unhelpful fertility information. I'm a fertility acupuncturist and educator, and this podcast aims to empower and inform you about your menstrual cycle and your fertility. It's basically all that information you didn't get in sex education at school, with the aim of helping you improve your reproductive health and increase your chances of conception. Hello and welcome to episode number 5. Katie, can you believe we're at number 5 already?
I know, it's just whizzing by. Like, I'm having a great time. Really enjoying myself.
Imagine if this was your job, if you were like a radio host DJ and this is what you did every day. It would be so good, wouldn't it?
Yeah, broadcaster.
So we're going to pretend that we are radio DJs today, and we're going to talk all about the luteal phase of your menstrual cycle. So really each episode is going through a different stage, and this is the stage when you have actually ovulated. So you've gone from the first stage, the first half, which is your follicular phase, which is all about the development of the follicle leading up to ovulation. And then as soon as that egg is released, you have moved into the luteal phase of your menstrual cycle. And often there is a real drop at this point in the cycle. So people can feel that once you've ovulated, your estrogen drops very, very quickly, and people can really feel that. Is this something that you notice, Katie? Is it something that affects you?
Yeah, definitely. I've really noticed that personally.
Yeah.
Less so in recent years, but definitely historically, I would get to like 10 days before my period. I'd be looking at because I just used an app back in the day, and it'll be like 10 days until your period's due, and I'd be like, I feel mental. And
right.
Like, I say that as a person with mental health issues, but like it would just be like this massive like falling off a cliff edge of like a drop in terms of my mood. And that is exactly what's happening with your estrogen levels.
Yes. And it's funny because, well, it's not funny, but it is something that I it's actually really the opposite.
It's really not funny at all.
Funny, odd, not funny, ha. It's it's that drop. People can be really sensitive because, as we were talking about last time, estrogen for lots of people can be so positive, and then when it's suddenly taken away from you, it can really change how you feel, and you might notice a real shift in your energy, a shift in your outlook. And you know, if you're not tracking, you can wonder what on earth is sort of, you know, why you've woken up that day not feeling yourself or feeling out of sorts. And for many people, it can be the drop in estrogen is what you're feeling. So that's sort of what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at the luteal phase, and we're going to talk about progesterone, because while your estrogen has dropped during the luteal phase, what is actually happening is that progesterone is taking over, and progesterone is the dominant hormone of your second half of your menstrual cycle. So we're going to look at like, what is progesterone all about? We're going to look at why this stage of your menstrual cycle is really important for your fertility. And I know I've said that at every single stage, but that is because each phase of your menstrual cycle is important. And that's why it's important to not just think about ovulation, not just think about your period, but look at what's happening at every stage, because having a good, you know, 4 stages is what's going to really maximize your fertility and maximize a good cycle. So we're going to look at why. Sorry, yeah, go.
I think as well, when you kind of start to understand that each phase can have a really big impact on the next, then that kind of helps you to look at it like, by improving your whole menstrual cycle, you'll be improving these individual aspects of it.
Yes. And in fact, we're going to talk about that, because we're going to talk about how you can improve your luteal phase, because I think probably the most common DM I get is about luteal phase problems. So how can I improve progesterone? How can I extend my luteal phase? It's a really, really popular question that people ask us. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at what can you do, like what are the signs and symptoms of low progesterone, and look at ways that you can improve your progesterone levels, because again, it's a really common problem that people ask us a lot about. So first of all, I'm going to just start with the luteal phase. So the luteal phase, as I said, it's from the time you've ovulated to the time that you have your period. And what has happened is that lovely, lovely follicle that has been growing in your follicular phase has burst, the egg has been released, and then that follicle becomes what's called the corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum is an organ. Is that the right word?
Gland. It's a little gland.
Gland. I mean, that is a word.
Gland.
Don't know why. Gland is funny, but it's making me
love a gland.
Why is gland a funny word? Anyway, it is a gland, and it is a gland that produces the progesterone. So this is how your body makes progesterone. So when you are not ovulating, you are not producing progesterone. And this is what people talk about a lot, of having a good hormonal cycle means that you have estrogen, you have ovulation, and that ovulation leads to progesterone production. Because if you don't ovulate, there is not enough progesterone in your body. So that follicle becomes the corpus luteum, it releases the progesterone, and basically that progesterone it's sort of going on a journey. So it starts off low, it reaches its peak about 7 days post ovulation, and then it will start to drop away. And progesterone, the hormone, can only live in your body for a maximum of 16 days. And if you're somebody who BBT charts, that's basal body temperature charts, then you will notice this when you're taking your temperature. You'll notice that your temperature rises, and that as your progesterone starts to wane away, your temperatures might start to drop. If you have 16 days of high temperatures and your temperatures aren't dropping, this means that your progesterone is rising further, and it means that you are pregnant, because you cannot have progesterone longer than 16 days unless you are actually pregnant. So if you are someone who BBT charts, you can get a lot of information about your progesterone levels and about any potential pregnancy from that. Is there anything I've missed out there from talking about the luteal phase? Oh, I know what I was going to say. I was also going to talk about testing progesterone, because it's a big thing, isn't it? How many times in clinic, Katie, do you think you've seen people who've had their progesterone tested at the wrong time?
More often than not.
Yeah, more than 50%, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And this is because the progesterone test is often referred to as the day 21 test, which is because science likes to put us in boxes and, assumes that we ovulate on day 14, and therefore 7 days post day 14 is day 21. And that is when our progesterone should be peaking. But as we know, and we've said many times, people ovulate at different times every single cycle. So if you want to get an accurate progesterone test to check whether your levels are sufficient enough, then we always say, don't go on day 21. Unless you've ovulated on day 14, obviously. Take 7 days after the day that you've ovulated. So if you've ovulated on day 16, then 7 days afterwards is going to be day 23. So that's a good bit of information to make sure you get a correct progesterone test and you're not wasting everybody's time. Katie, do you want to talk about progesterone? It's a funny one, isn't it? Estrogen gets all the love, doesn't it? Estrogen's like, everyone loves the estrogen. But when it comes to progesterone, I feel like it gets a bit of a hard rap.
Yeah, progesterone, it can get a bit of a bad rap compared to estrogen, which is a bit silly, really, because it's another great hormone. It can have really positive impacts. I just think a lot of people do experience like low progesterone symptoms, therefore we think progesterone is like not as great as estrogen. But in terms of on a hormonal level, like the differences between the two of them, so estrogen is building that base layer of the endometrium, so the lining that we shed every month when we have a period, whereas progesterone is like really plumping it out, getting it ready for an egg to like implant itself into and nestle its way into, so hopefully a pregnancy can occur. But thinking about progesterone, progesterone, our progestation hormone. So it's the hormone that helps us to sustain an early pregnancy. So it's really important in terms of that respect, but we want to be having good levels of progesterone to make us feel good. Low progesterone can often lead to symptoms like PMS or like breast tenderness and things. So we want to make sure we're supporting our progesterone levels. But progesterone So whereas estrogen is like the sort of getting yourself out and about and like wanting to be out in the world and maybe being a bit more expansive in how you feel, progesterone by its nature does make you want to be a bit more internal and like be a bit more like looking after yourself, because at the end of the day, your body, whether you want to or not, your body is preparing yourself as if you were about to have an embryo implant to that lining of the womb.
So, yeah, just to jump in there, Casey, as well, is to say that, you know, from a very, very biological, on a very biological level, it's like the body assumes that it's pregnant in the second half of the cycle, because it doesn't know whether you are or not until that progesterone starts to drop, which signals there is no pregnancy. Until that point, your body thinks that it is. And so that's why a progesterone is associated with this idea of safety. Like, it's been shown that you're less likely to take a risk in the second half of your menstrual cycle because, you know, in a hardcore biological way, your body thinks that you're pregnant, and therefore it's, you know, it's not safe to do so. And also,
protecting that. Yeah,
it's protecting. It also could explain why you get this increase in hunger, because, you know, it's sort of, it's wanting to kind of like feed and protect. And
we do need like an extra 300 calories or something like that when we're in the luteal phase. Like, we literally do need more energy to sustain all the biological functions that are going on. So that is part of why you might feel more hungry in the second half of your cycle. Like, listen to that. Like, your body does need a bit of extra oomph in that time.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because in some ways, you know, like, we're like this sort of, you know, advanced human race going around, you know, on our smartphones and all that jazz. But ultimately, internally, we are like still in the caves, you know, like this whole kind of menstrual cycle thing that goes on regardless of what's happened in society or what level of advancement we're at. Our cycles are still running in the same way they did from right at the beginning, you know, this time of like ovulation, you know, up to ovulation, it's all about going out, finding your caveman. And then you're kind of like, you're in the cave. There's no Netflix, but you're chuffing away on whatever bit of dinosaur you found, you know. You know, and those kind of like really hardcore, basic human nature biological processes are still going on, even though you might have no awareness of it. But it does explain a lot of that changing behaviour and how you think and feel.
It does really blow my mind if I think about it too much that we are animals. Like, it really like freaks me out a bit, but then it's like, no, but we are. And then you look at to kind of go off topic ever so slightly, but hypnobirthing practices, and they're talking about creating like a nice dark warm environment for birth and things. And it's like, we look at all other animals or like mammals that they'll go off somewhere quiet to give birth, and it's like we are animals, and we have all these biological functions that our body just does these things because it knows how, and it knows how to look after us.
It totally blows my mind as well, and it's a good one to understand as well, isn't it? I think it's trying to conceive, because often there's this whole idea when you're in that luteal phase where people really start symptom spotting, and start googling and start, oh, I've got tender breasts, is it this? Oh, I've got a bit of spotting here, is it implantation? And I always say to people, try really hard on that. You know, I say this with love because I know it's not easy, but you cannot symptom spot, because like we said, your body thinks that it's pregnant, and that will not be confirmed or not until you get a test drop. So it's impossible, because the body is mimicking the fact that it is pregnant. So it's kind of a cruel mistress.
It is, and especially that a lot of low progesterone symptoms can mimic early pregnancy, and it's like, actually maybe these are things you need to be working on, rather than being like, am I pregnant? So obviously that's what a lot of people, their desired thing will be, but sometimes I'm listening and I'm like, I think there's a bit more work to do. It's hard. It's really hard.
It is really hard. And the luteal phase is such an important part of, you know, supporting fertility, because you need a good luteal phase, you need a good length of time, and you need a good amount of progesterone to hold your uterus lining in place. Because actually, you know, once that egg has been released and let's say fertilization has occurred, then, you know, the embryo needs to travel down the fallopian tube and into the uterus cavity. And then it can take some time. I mean, I always think of it as like wandering around looking for a good place to stop. And that can take like 2 or 3 days. So it could be, you know, 7 days post the egg being released that it's starting to implant. So if you're somebody who's got a short luteal phase and that lining, that progesterone level is starting to drop and the lining isn't sort of being held in place, then it is possible that any implantation is not given enough time to really secure itself for that change to happen, so that the HCG, that hormone that's released when you are pregnant, which then signals for your progesterone levels to go up, that sort of you know, combination of events hasn't had time to happen, and your period has begun too soon. And you know, people do get pregnant with shorter luteal phase, but you know, when people come to us, we're all about optimizing, aren't we? We're all about getting you the very best cycle that you can to give yourself the best possible chance. So that's why we're obsessed about doing like this.
Yeah, like I always say to clients, like just as a reminder, because I think it is helpful to just that reminder of like a pregnancy can happen in any cycle provided ovulation happens. However, like you said, we're all about getting you to an optimal place where everything is where we want it to be in that optimal phase. So like in an ideal world, your luteal phase is going to be about 12 to 14 days in length. Anything less than that we would consider short and want to like work on improving it, because one, that's going to help with conception happening, with that implantation happening. As we said, it takes time for that to happen. But also, like, even if you're not trying to get pregnant and you're just really struggling with some symptoms, like supporting your luteal phase can have just a really positive impact on your day-to-day as well.
Yes, because that's the other thing, and we are going to do a whole episode on PMS, premenstrual syndrome, because progesterone is the hormone that is related to PMS. And it's interesting because nobody actually knows properly why people get PMS, but there is definitely a sensitivity to progesterone that is part of it. And I'm not saying it's the only reason, but it is definitely has a role in PMS. So too much of it or too little of it or sensitivity to it can be involved. So working, you know, on supporting your hormone balance can only help if you are somebody who suffers from PMS as well. So can you tell us low progesterone? We talk about it a lot. Tell us some good signs and symptoms for people to look out for if they've got low progesterone.
So one of the most common things that people come with is spotting in their luteal phase. So it's usually like we'll see people spotting about within the week before their period is due, say, is when I'd kind of typically expect to see it if low progesterone is an issue. So when you're like wiping, going to the toilet, or maybe in your pants, there's just like a little bit of blood there, that's an indicator that, yeah, the progesterone levels are low. There's not enough progesterone to sustain that lining, and there's some bleeding that's happening. So that's a real indicator. If the luteal phase is short, which we mentioned earlier, so if it's like less than 12 days, then that's a real indicator that progesterone levels are low. Like if they're less than 10, then like we really want to be looking at what we can be doing to support you with that. If you're tracking your basal body temperature, so this is when you're taking your temperature first thing in the morning, after ovulation, your temperature should go up and it should stay up. If your temperature is kind of like hopping and jumping around all over the place, if it's dropping down, significantly up and down in that luteal phase, then that's an indicator again that progesterone, there's not enough there, keeping the temperature nice and high. You also might see, in an ideal world with basal body temperature, we would see the temperature have quite like a sharp drop the day of or the day before your period. Whereas if you're having like kind of a slow incline in the like 3 to 5 days before your period starts, then that's an indicator that your progesterone levels are dropping like too early and you're having this slow decline rather than like a nice kind of drop and then your period would start. So that's something to look out for as well.
Yeah, great. And you know, we are going to do, our next episode is all about tracking. So we are going to talk about BBT charts next episode. But if you are concerned about your progesterone, if it's something that you're worried about or you're not sure about, then I don't know what you think, Katie, but I think BBT charting is a really good way to have a look.
I really like it. Yeah.
You know, and I know it can be, I know it's a bit of a pain in the bum, but I think if you've got concerns and you want good information, you want reassurance, or you want to really pinpoint what is going on, then I think BBT charting for like 2 or 3 cycles can give you a whole load of information about what is happening in that luteal phase, what is happening with your progesterone levels, which can really help inform what tests you need to do, what treatments you might want to seek out. So it's definitely worth doing. What do you reckon?
Yeah, totally. And I was just going to say, like, when you said about like just for 2 or 3 charts, like if BBT is something you do find particularly stressful, because some people do, then just deciding, right, I'm going to really commit to this for 2 or 3 months, get some data, be able to go to my GP or someone like us with this data, and then be able to like work with that can be so beneficial. It will give you so much insight as to what's going on. And then if you decide to, so you've got those couple of cycles of data, you're working on your cycle, then you do it again for a cycle, then it's quite clear where the improvements have been. So like, I really love BBT. So I think it's a great thing to do if you're, if progesterone is something you're really looking to improve on.
And I, you know, just following on from that, if you are worried about low progesterone, like what can you do? What are your recommendations? You know, from when you did your fertility awareness last year, what were I bet you talked about progesterone all the time. What as you do? What are your kind of like top tips for improving progesterone levels?
I mean, a lot of them are going to be similar to what we talked about last week, but nutrition, particularly just eating enough, full stop. I see so many people that are under eating, making sure you're getting plenty of protein. Like at the end of the day, protein is like the building block of your hormones. You need to be getting enough protein in your diet to literally make these hormones. If you've got a very low protein diet, then your poor reproductive system isn't going to stand a chance. So getting plenty of protein into your diet. Stress management is a massive one with progesterone. I know this was something you taught me, actually, was the link between cortisol and progesterone. So cortisol being one of our main stress hormones, and progesterone is like the precursor to cortisol, which basically means that if you're looking at them on like a molecular level, to get fancy with you, they look almost identical. Like you don't need to be a molecular scientist to look at these and be like, oh, they look very, very similar. So long story short is that your body's going to prioritize making the stress hormone over progesterone. So managing your stress levels is really, really important.
Yeah, because if it has to choose, it will always choose the stress, not the progesterone.
Yeah, because it will view that as keeping you alive versus can I make a baby right now? And it's like, it will keep you alive over that.
Which is, again, goes back to, you know, living in the caves, doesn't it? You know, biological fundamental thing. We've got to, you know, run from the Tyrannosaurus Rex. I mean, I don't remember the same timeline. I mean,
I don't think it was, but I like the idea.
I completely made that up. So
have you been watching Jurassic Park?
I've watched all of them. You think
great.
No, anyway, there's no cave people in that, are there?
No, but there are dinosaurs, so.
Anyway, moving on from my bad history. That's why I work in fertility, not in history. But it's a very biological process, isn't it? That's what we're talking about. And you know, it was there for a reason back in the day when we were but we don't need that anymore. But our bodies are still the same. They're still stuck in that case.
They still respond the same way, yeah.
The other thing that I would say about progesterone and supporting your luteal phase is that it's sometimes really important to take a step back, because your progesterone is made, as we said at the beginning of the episode, by your follicle. So that follicle that housed the egg is where your progesterone came from or comes from. So if you have not had a good follicular phase, so if you've been poorly, if you've not been looking after yourself, you know, all the usual things, then, you know, that follicular development may not have been sufficient enough for that follicle to become a good enough corpus luteum to produce the enough progesterone for a good luteal phase. So like we always talk about this interconnectedness of your cycle, and this is often where you see it. So sometimes I know there are things that you can do to support your progesterone in that point when you're in that point of your cycle, but it's also important to look back and not just focus on it. Sort of a bit like you know, after the horse has bolted, sometimes it's too late. You are where you are and you can't do anything because it was all about that follicular development in the first place. So I would always say, don't just concentrate on that, the second half, look at the first half and look at what's going on there. There's also a lot of nutritional stuff, isn't there, about progesterone levels and your luteal phase. And I would always say, I know there are specific ones, they talk a lot about B vitamins, C vitamins, and Agnus castus, isn't it, I think, or Vitex.
Yeah.
It's commonly cited as a good...
Yeah, magnesium as well is a really great one with PMS. But remembering you can't supplement your way out of nutrition. Exactly. Just as a...
That should be another logo on our T-shirt. And you can't supplement your way out of a bad diet. That could be another logo phrase that we have. And you can't. And it's always good to get personal nutritional advice because what might be right for you might not be right for another person.
It's so individual.
Yeah, you need someone to be looking at the whole shebang to make it count, to make it be the best kind of nutritional advice and support you could possibly get.
Shout out to Kirsty, our team nutritionist.
Exactly. So I think we have covered enough for today on the luteal phase. In the show notes, we are going to be putting a link up to Katie's fertility awareness course. Do you want to say a little bit about that? Because it's a really good time to bring that in, I think.
Yeah, sure. So I am a fertility awareness mentor and I work with clients one-to-one over a 5-month stretch of time. And we work together. So I would teach you how to use fertility awareness. So people come to fertility awareness mostly when they're trying to conceive. Some people use it as a method of birth control, but it's a really great way, like we were talking about with BBT, to be able to see your cycle in this new way and to really understand exactly what's going on with it. And then, so I'm teaching you how to use fertility awareness. And then there's this mentoring aspect of just getting your cycle into the best place it can be, particularly if you're looking to try and conceive or sort out some cycle issues. So it's a really great program. I have had people say it's life-changing. So I'm just going to tell you that. It really is. It definitely was for me. In order to teach fertility awareness, I've had to do it myself. And huge learnings there. So we're talking about the luteal phase here. That was the massive thing for me. My luteal phase was 7 days long and it should be 12 to 14. It's no wonder I felt awful. So having seeing that on a chart was so motivating to be okay, I'm going to work on these different things. And my cycles are quite different now to what they used to be. So, and that's all through learning fertility awareness. So yeah, I'm taking on clients and love you to come on board.
Brilliant. And if you've been listening to the podcast and you're thinking, yeah, that's me, and you're looking for that support to really help guide you through it and really help somebody spot what your underlying issues might be, then that is the ticket, my friend, as they say.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, as always, Katie. And
absolute pleasure.
I look forward. We're going to do tracking, and I look forward to that. And have a very lovely day.
Yeah, I'll see you next week.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you have learned something helpful about your reproductive health and your fertility. If you would like to find out more information, then please come and join us in our free community on Facebook. We have tons of resources, access to our webinars, we do live Q&As, and it's a chance to connect with other people who are trying to conceive. The link to register is in our show notes, and we hope to see you there.